But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, me. It's finally happened, folks. I wrote a book. Hunter's Journal is a fan-made, in-universe publishing of the diaries of monster hunters, describing their various exploits across the vast world of the series. This first entry describes one hunter's journey through the region that started it all, the Forest and Hills, or Verdant Hills if you played Monster Hunter GU. It details the thoughts, feelings, and actions of this unnamed hunter while out on a seemingly typical quest. Each physical book is handcrafted and printed on parchment, with text by me and art by the amazing Valky. You can get your copy over on the Guild Surplus store. Thank you for your time, and back to the video. Across the Hunters Guild's second generation of research, few projects were as ambitious as the Elder Dragon investigations. While Elder Dragon observatories had existed for quite some time at this point, the insights into creatures like Chameleos and Kushala Daora galvanized a need to find out more about these powerful beings, not just because they were dangerous, but because they were fascinating. In hindsight, many consider the second generation as the bedrock for all future Elder Dragon research. This desire to understand naturally resulted in more fundamental questions being asked. First and foremost, what even are Elder Dragons? So far, it had mostly been a functional title. If a creature was unknowable, affected the ecosystem disproportionately, and was so powerful that it required large-scale mobilization and evacuation to deal with, it would be called an Elder Dragon to make sure that hunters and civilians alike took it seriously enough. But if research was to really take off and be shared across multiple semi-independent organizations, some basic, consistent definition had to be established. After much humming and hawing, scholars of the guild eventually settled on a few key axioms of what defines an Elder Dragon. Most importantly, it was decided that the term Elder Dragon was to be a waste bin classification, a group whose members' shared feature is that they fit nowhere else in the classification system. This may seem dismissive, but it does adequately account for the fact that a common thread across all Elder Dragons is that they mostly live in myth and folklore, with very little concrete knowledge on their biology and ecology. Trying to place them anywhere on the existing tree of life would take assumptions upon assumptions, and so, an entirely separate group defined by that disconnect made the most sense. This was exacerbated by the realization that Elder Dragons didn't seem well represented in the fossil record either, making any taxonomical claims about them quite difficult. Thus, a core characteristic of Elder Dragons was determined to be that they seem largely disconnected from all other forms of life in terms of evolutionary ancestry. That is not to say that no commonalities and patterns emerged within this group. As research progressed, scholars noted that the thus far recorded Elder Dragons did in fact display physiological similarities between each other. Many of the discovered species shared a body plan: 4 legs, 2 wings, a tail, and a head, often horned. This was not entirely consistent, the Kirin being an obvious outlier, but it was notable. Moreover, this body plan has, to this day, never been seen in a creature that wasn't already considered an Elder Dragon. So this general body shape is perhaps the ancestral link that all dragons share, and the reason they don't fit with any wyvern or beast lineages. As analytical tools improved, more insights into Elder Dragons were gained. The blood of elders is special, containing a mysterious compound that imbues it with special energies. Blood samples are thus to this day a good method to determine if a creature might be related to elder dragons. With these workable definitions in hand, researchers continue to investigate all sorts of myths and legends. One story that caught their attention was that of the flame dragon. Like the steel dragon, this entity appeared in many stories of various origins, always wielding a broiling kiln of fire in its maw, often revered as a god of destruction and rage. The reason why this myth in particular was interesting to the guild lay in the description of the dragon. In all versions of the story, it was coated in fur and had a head reminiscent of a beast rather than a wyvern. To find a furry elder dragon would be fascinating, and perhaps shine some further light into the lineage. Another curious detail about this dragon is that across all of its tellings, its appearance is shockingly consistent in description, except its color. Half of the time, the dragon is described as red, while in many other myths, it is said to be blue. This consistent inconsistency seemed like an indicator of something truly worth studying. As they ventured into villages and regions where the myth was dominant, scholars gradually gained an understanding of what this creature might be. One researcher even spotted a likely candidate of this myth from afar, a dragon-like silhouette, distinctly blue in color. Even after this sighting, though, many locals insisted that the dragon was actually red. This back and forth continued until an older researcher was able to observe a flame dragon up close, watching it lick a cave wall. After it had left, the researcher collected saliva samples, and the investigation was able to kick into high gear. Curiously, this specimen was red, and so knowledge progressed until, finally, a comprehensive idea of this being was constructed. There were, in fact, 2 flame dragons, not different species, but rather different sexes. The male flame dragon is red and was named Teostra by the guild, while the female is blue and was given the name Lunastra. While their fur did not end up being as revelatory as the guild had hoped, it was still a massive find. The first recorded case of sexual dimorphism in an elder dragon species. Aside from the color and the shape of their horns, both types of flame dragon are quite similar. They have long, stiff tails and massive, furry wings. Their backs are covered in hair, while their limbs and underbellies are protected by a hard dragon shell. Their heads are most curious. A truly beast-like face, reminiscent of that of a lion, surrounded by a wild mane and beard, crowned with massive horns and armed with protruding tusks. Even if no clear link to fanged wyvern or fanged beasts could be established to this day, the similarities are noteworthy. For a long time, the 2 dragons were only ever sighted alone, which made their exact relationship hard to determine. It wasn't until fairly recently that the first mating pair of Teostra and Lunastra was observed, all the way in the New World. To this day, no mating pair has ever been seen in the Old World. Studying these flame dragons is quite difficult, as all of their materials are highly flammable and can explode without warning. Be that as it may, the guild still pushed on and managed to gain various insights into this fascinating dragon species. Their habitat range is mostly confined to hot regions, such as volcanoes or deserts, but they have on occasion been spotted in swamps as well. They are mostly terrestrial and don't seem to fly often. The female Lunastra is considered a more competent flyer, while the male Teostra seems to prefer staying on the ground. In fact, for a long time, it was believed that the male had entirely lost the ability to fly, until Teostras in the New World were observed flying with ease. Both sexes are surprisingly agile on land, having specialized back feet with pads and claws that allow them to propel themselves off the ground with explosive force. As they travel, the flame dragons feed not on plant or animal life, but on ores. Both males and females have been seen eating minerals by biting through cave walls. They have also, on occasion, been seen snacking on fire herbs and nitro shrooms. While there is some debate on if one can even call this eating, as it is just a consumption of minerals, these materials seem at the very least to be essential to maintaining the dragon's body. Specifically, these materials seem to fuel the flame dragon's main ability, its total control over flame and heat. The body temperature of this dragon species is absurdly high, while it itself is entirely immune to the effects of heat. Both the shell and the fur of the flame dragon are tough and resistant to heat, and can even repel physical attacks. The ores and minerals the dragon consumes are processed in the body into two components: a highly flammable gas and a waste material in form of a powder. The gas can be mixed with the dragon's saliva into a burning oil, which allows the Teostra and Lunastra to spew out streams of fire from their mouths. For reasons that aren't clear to the guild, the flames of the female burn much hotter than those of the male, giving their fire breaths a distinct color as well. Teostra's flames are the typical orange, while Lunastra's breath is a scorching blue, reserved only for the fiercest of all flames. The ability to spit near endless quantities of fire would by itself make these two extremely dangerous. But the fury of the flame dragons comes in two distinct forms, both ferocious in their own right. Most commonly seen is the flame shroud, the dragon's first line of defense. This technique envelops the body of the dragon in its flammable gas, as it burns invisibly in the air. This manifests as an aura of intense heat around the dragon, with tiny flames flickering in its shell and mane. The transparent shroud distorts the air around the body through the heat, which has given Teostra and Lunastra the nickname Heat Haze Dragons. This shroud does more than just distort air, however. The temperature difference between the air immediately around the body and the air further away creates a sort of pocket that can divert and even repel projectile attacks. But more importantly, the rising temperature around the dragon makes even being near it deadly. Not even guild-approved cool drinks can protect a human from perishing in the infernal heat of a Teostra or Lunastra's proximity. This has even wider effects. As a constant emitter of extreme heat, the very presence of a flame dragon alters the climate of a region, causing heat waves and, over prolonged periods of time, a deadly drought. A walking disaster indeed. Thanks to their increased internal temperature, the flame dragons also become more proficient at using their fire breath while the flame shroud is active. As the body heats up and the shroud becomes stronger, the mane of the flame dragon glows intensely, an indicator of their power. The second application of the flame dragon's power is called the blast shroud, and utilizes the powder that is left over after turning the ingested ores into gas. This powder is theoretically a waste product, but the flame dragons find use for it all the same. Through the skin, the powder is ejected and accumulated in the fur, especially among the tiny hairs that cover the underside of the dragon's wing membranes. Usually, this powder simply stays in the fur and passively falls off. To activate the blast shroud, the dragon begins emitting copious amounts of this powder, which begins floating off the body continuously. This powder is usually harmless, but when primed by the high temperature of the air surrounding the dragon, it becomes extremely explosive. The flame dragon can ignite this blast powder by creating a spark, using either its flint-like teeth, claws, or wingtips. Curiously, the male Teostra seems to prefer using its teeth more so than the female Lunastra. Either way, this gives the dragon a highly explosive offensive option. The powder can either be deposited nearby with simple body motions or spread across a wider area by flapping the wings. Once a spark is created, it ripples across the clouds of powder and ignites all of them. The specific application of their blast shroud is also where the two sexes differ the most. The powder produced by the male Teostra is light and floats in the air naturally. The male can thus create clouds of blast powder that hover around as time bombs, waiting for their master to spark them into detonation. The powder of the female Lunastra, meanwhile, is dense and heavy. Instead of floating, it falls to the ground in piles. When sparked, it doesn't merely explode, but alights into a raging spire of blue flame that lingers on the ground as the remaining powder burns away. The density of the powder makes the burning reaction much more violent, releasing huge amounts of energy while the flames linger. This manifests in wind blasts, which can prevent targets from moving and trap them in a blue inferno. What is consistent between the two dragons, however, is the incredible degree of control they have over their powders. Both the Teostra and especially the Lunastra can control the precise quantity, location, and even movement of their blast powders. How this is possible is unknown, but hunters have noted that as the blast shroud is kept active, the horns of the dragons begin to glow. Horns being key to an elder dragon's ability is a known pattern, and it appears that the flame dragons further confirm it. Curiously, the blast shroud is not just a combat ability. Researchers have observed flame dragons activating it in low-stress situations and simply detonating the powder near or even on their bodies. The current hypothesis is that this mechanism is originally meant to be used as a way of cleaning off grime and dirt from the dragon's shell, and that weaponizing it emerged as a secondary application. When fighting, the flame dragons will periodically cycle between their two shrouds. Why they do this was long unknown, since most enemies wouldn't live to see more than 1 or 2 cycles at most anyway. It was only as the average skill level of monster hunters increased that hunting parties could push Teostra and Lunastra hard enough to witness what the purpose of their shroud cycle really was. As the dragons use their shrouds, their bodies become hotter and hotter, as well as coated in more and more blast powder. After enough cycles, these factors reach a zenith, at which point they can be unleashed as a devastating ultimate attack. Both sexes use this opportunity differently. The Teostra's method is blunt and straightforward. Once it notices the time has come, it flies into the air and curls up, covering as much of itself with powder as possible while also spreading much of it into the surrounding area. By spiking its body temperature beyond its usual limits rapidly, the Teostra ignites all of the powder at once, causing a chain reaction resulting in a singular, massive explosion. The guild calls this move supernova, as it reminded many scholars of that most violent astronomical event. The Lunastra's approach is more sophisticated. As its body heats up, air pockets form around it as a result of temperature gradients. When the time is right, the Lunastra ignites its powder like the Teostra, but instead of having it detonate on its body, it forces the powder into the air pockets, which burst outward in the process. The result is a massive wave of blue flame, as the burning powder is accelerated and dispersed by the bursting air pockets across a wide area, creating a sea of blue fire that emanates heat and pulses with wind pressure. Guild hunters call this attack Hellflare, as the deepest depths of the Inferno must look quite similar to the aftermath of this move. Their abilities make the flame dragons extremely dangerous, and due to their body temperature, their mere appearance is enough to cause immense damage to any ecosystem. But, luckily, they generally stay away from populated areas and stick to remote volcanic regions. In the wild, one can observe slight behavioral differences between the sexes. While both are extremely aggressive and violent towards any kind of opponent, they express it in different ways. The male Teostra is proactive and curious, actively investigating its surroundings. This makes it a slightly more problematic creature, as it has, on occasion, wandered into human settlements looking to snack on their store of gunpowder, a delicious treat in the eyes of the flame dragons. In the Old World, the Teostra is quite feared, as it will attack almost immediately upon spotting anything it perceives as worth fighting. Curiously, the Teostra found in the New World are much more relaxed, and generally more averse to open conflict with anything that isn't a fellow Elder Dragon. The female Lunastra, meanwhile, is a guarded, vigilant dragon, always on the lookout, bordering on paranoid. That is why Lunastra sightings are much rarer comparatively. Lunastra are also known to maintain their flame shroud at almost all times, even when not in overt danger, as opposed to the Teostra, which only activates it in response to a threat. When forced to battle, a Lunastra is more ferocious than her partner, its vigilance blossoming into cruel wrath. In the Old World, Lunastra were however also known to be quite skittish. Should a fight drag on, the female dragon would often flee instead of prolonging the encounter, a calculated move to minimize effort on her part. The guild even had to establish a rule at one point that only one hunter may face a Lunastra at a time, since a larger group would scare the dragon away again. This behavior is completely absent in New World Lunastra, which will always stand their ground to the bitter end. The New World was, in general, a breakthrough for the study of flame dragons, mostly because it was the first time a mating pair had been identified. While footprints and abandoned nests found on the eastern continent of Funron had long since confirmed that the Teostra and Lunastra do in fact mate, it wasn't until 50 years into the New World expedition that the two dragons were observed pairing up. The resulting insights into their behavior and courtship rituals are to this day some of the most influential work the guild has ever compiled. Teostra and Lunastra seem to pair up for life, and their union is preceded by a meticulous courtship phase. First, the male Teostra must find a lava lake or similar location of sorts. Then, by carefully melting and then cooling rock and lava on top of each other, the male forms a sort of island in the lake, a rocky platform amidst the lava. This arena serves as a proving ground for the male's control over its flame. A lava lake is unstable and chaotic, with random eruptions that rearrange the landscape constantly. To build a nest here and maintain it is the mark of a true master of flame, and the tidier and flatter this plateau is, the more attractive the Teostra is to any visiting Lunastra. The dragons then shake their manes as they inspect each other, and researchers have noted that Teostras with larger manes seem to have more success than those with smaller ones. Once the partnership is established, the two dragons become inseparable, with the Lunastra surveying the skies while the Teostra prowls the ground. The most spectacular expression of their partnership comes when both dragons are engaged in a fight against a common enemy. The pair will synchronize its shroud cycle such that they both reach criticality at the same time. The two then unleash their ultimate moves together, Teostra's supernova merging with Lunastra's hellflare into a devastating double explosion. While this is terrible for whatever unfortunate souls the pair was fighting, the dragons use this moment to reaffirm their bond to each other. It appears reasonable to assert that this pairing behavior is key to the life of flame dragons. This makes the fact that it has never been seen in Old World individuals all the more baffling. Some scholars suggested that the flame dragons found in the New World were a regional variation that simply pairs up more frequently and openly, while the Old World variation is more reclusive. There was some merit to the idea, as New World flame dragons displayed a few physiological and behavioral differences. The Teostra is better at flying, the Lunastra is more aggressive, both are more agile and both have more hair on their bodies, including a larger mane. These could be indicators of speciation or, at the very least, regional variation. However, a counter-hypothesis was proposed recently, one that has become quite dominant. The differences between Old World and New World flame dragons might actually be age-related. A more developed mane, a better grasp of one's physical abilities, a deeper expression of one's personality. These could be signs of more mature individuals of the species. The hypothesis thus postulates that the flame dragons of the New World are individuals that have reached sexual maturity. That would explain why no pairs were ever seen in the Old World. Those dragons are simply too young on average. Once they are strong enough to fly across the sea, they migrate to the new continent and meet up to begin their courtship. This might also explain why the Lunastra is so aggressive, as she might be affected by hormonal changes that are related to the mating season. This also fits nicely with the established fact that the New World's elder crossing tends to attract older dragons on average. Why the flame dragons would migrate instead of just pairing up in the Old World is, however, still a mystery, and no convincing theories have thus far been constructed. Thank you all so much for watching, as always, and as usual I would like to extend special thank yous to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon or through YouTube channel memberships. A very special shout out to Admiral Frost, Alistair in Wonderland, Andrew, Autumns, Big Mac, Black Ace 202, B, Bruggy, Carcerion, Chocolate Coat, Claire Miboon, Coomer Noob, Darkest, Destro, Draco Vane, Dragonlord, Dissy, Echo but Evil, Ethan Toombs, Theopuz, Golden Sushi X, Grüße an Mama, Harpier, Hellbug Hunter, Hudsan, I'm just happy to be here, Iron Camel, It's Robin Now, Jack of All Shades, Jacob Coleman, Joey Tribby 58, Magenta, Carl the Crab, Kogath, Lieferdienst, Logan Bilodeau, Lone Strider, Low Motion Algae, Lufish, M1 Have 1 2, Macaroni Leviathan, Makamawi, Makot 02, Mathat 124, Meta Defiance, Mr. Pyramid, Molly Mockery, My Name Gone, Nico Soleil, Nils Schlatter, Noah Schanz, Oak Wood Tree, Paige Gandalf Soda, Pancake Poppy, Person 212, Precum King, Punonym, Quali, Quixotic Metroid 906, Rambling Robin, Raspberry, Regal Eagle, Resident Neko Arc, Ronger 97, Rose, Ryan Hook, Skiba, Shebo, Silly Wizard 97, Siragon, Sir Newt Newt, Soruka, Sparkdrake, Tacti Wolf, The Alchemist, The Iciest Man Alive, The Dollarfish, 3 Palicos in a Trench Coat, Tigrex Chew Toy, Tipped Over, Toby Kadachi's OnlyFan, Tsuki Midnight Boshi, Unk with Good Puss, Uthduna is an Octopus, Vulgar Beast, Wandering Soul, Wolf of Time, Zaffi, Dino Garcia, Zion H.V. Augenson, and Kuroneko. I'll see you next time. Bye.